Now, a stronger dollar has contributed to a drop in commodity prices like oil. So has a drop in demand from places like China, which has been a huge consumer of global commodities. We spoke with Dambisa Moyo, author of Winner Take All, China's Race for Resources and What It Means for the World. We started with whether a stronger dollar threatens China's economy.
Obviously, factors driving the U.S. Do play into the Chinese story, and especially where the trade and the exchange rate are concerned. But I think more fundamentally, the story is about what China needs to do for China. They face major headwinds themselves in terms of a slowing down economy with a massive population, at least 1 billion people who live very impoverished lives. So the focus is much less about what the U.S. is doing, I would say, and much more about what China needs to do itself to stave off economic downturn.
And we saw the response this week with China cutting interest rates, trying to stimulate double-digit percentage GDP growth again. But we didn't see a corresponding increase in commodity prices right away. Normally you'd see that. China lowering the cost of cash, global commodity prices go up. We didn't see it this time. Why?
I think that fundamentally the story still holds. There's far too much demand outstripping not enough supply. So, for example, even in the most bearish scenario where people think China is going to grow at 7.5%, you still have supply of energy and minerals growing at 2.5%. So you've got a 5% sort of gap between demand and supply. So I think in a tactical short-term perspective, I know people are very negative. They're worried about the electricity numbers, industrial production numbers out of China, issues around railway usage, bank loans, and so on. But I think that the fundamental structural story still holds, and I think, therefore, you will continue to see an upward trajectory around commodity prices.
One of the points that you make in your book, Winner Take All, is that China is the only country that understands the risks of the coming commodity crisis. Is the U.S. simply in the dark regarding this?
China has adopted what in the book I call a multilateral approach to solving or addressing the commodity issue, whereas the United States, one would argue, and I do argue, has adopted a much more of a unilateral approach, which is very much focused on military incursions and military attacks, such as the ones that we've seen in Iraq.
But we have seen U.S. oil production. We have seen U.S. oil production hit its highest point since the early 1990s. Domestic production is skyrocketed.
Yes, absolutely. But my comments pertain to how the United States interacts with other countries around the commodity question. China has basically befriended what in the book I call the axis of the unloved. These are countries and regions such as places like Africa, Brazil, across South America, and parts of Eastern Europe. Countries that are heavily, very heavily resource endowed in terms of energy and minerals. And this is not an approach that the United States has adopted. And I think in the long term, it will actually be very beneficial.
We'll have to leave it there. Dambisa Moyo along with us. Very interesting read, the book Winner Take All.